Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Dan Cordemanch with Major League Soccer, and thank you for joining us for the 2018 State of the League address as we recap the 2018 season and look ahead to season in 2019. A couple quick housekeeping things. One, clearly we have an exciting matchup this weekend with the Portland Timbers and Atlanta United. The winner of that match will play in the Campeones Cup next summer. You recall earlier this year we announced a partnership with Liga MX, and we had that first Campeones Cup up in Toronto in September. This year, and this is new, Campeones Cup will be played August 14th, either here in Atlanta at Mercedes-Benz Stadium or at Providence Park out in Oregon. Also, MLS Cup will decide the fifth entrant from Major League Soccer into the CONCACAF Champions League. That will either be the Portland Timbers, if they win. If the Timbers do not win, it will be the Red Bulls from up in New York. A couple quick housekeeping things. One, if we could ask you to silence your cell phones, either turn them off or turn off your ringer, pretty straightforward. If you haven't already done so, on your way out, if you could pick up your credential, that's on the 6th floor here at the Westin. Also, clearly we're going to have some formal remarks from our Commissioner, Don Garber. Then we'll follow with a question and answer session for the journalists. MLS Cup, and we have many representatives here, will be televised certainly by Fox and Unimas, TSN, TVA, and 170 countries throughout the world. Many of those great partners are here. We will have a transcript that will be made available after today's press conference, and that will certainly be on Major League Soccer's media website, and we'll send it out to our journalists. So finally, we'll kick it off here. I'm going to do some quick introductions. To my immediate left is the President and Deputy Commissioner of Major League Soccer and the league's first employee back in 1993, Mark Abbott, who many of you know well. Clearly, in the middle is the Commissioner of Major League Soccer, Mr. Don Garber. And then finally, to Commissioner Garber's left is the President of Major League Soccer Business Ventures, Mr. Gary Stevenson. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to the Commissioner of Major League Soccer, Don Garber.
Thank you very much, Dan. You know, I was in the lobby yesterday, and a young guy, not so young really, pulled me aside and said that he was attending his 23rd MLS Cup. And I know Michael Lewis, who's here somewhere, is another 23-year veteran. And the only other person that I know is a 23-year veteran is Mark Abbott, who has been at every MLS Cup. So it is really great to be here in Atlanta. And I want to welcome everybody to the 23rd rendition of our championship game. You know, there's no doubt that this club has been one of the great stories in the history of our league, and in my opinion, and many of you have heard me say this before, I think it's one of the great stories in professional sports. Their success shows that there really is no limit to what MLS can be. When this league was launched, we had a great vision of trying to build a league that could earn the respect not just of those people that were from the game and part of the game for so many years, but could earn the respect of the rest of the world. And I think what's happening here is a very strong statement about how our country is a true soccer nation. I was in the World League Forum down in Mexico City 2 weeks ago with a number of our staff, and the buzz about our league, driven in many ways by the excitement that's happening here in Atlanta, is really very paramount. You know, I'm asked very often what's been driving the success of this club. And it starts with, in this city, this team really, truly matters. It's embraced by fans from all walks of life, from the corner office to the corner store, from the halls of political power to the recording studios that exist throughout this city. From the most avid fans to the most casual fans, this game and Atlanta United games throughout the year are the place to be. I was at a conference about a year ago, and I bumped into Sally Yates, for those of you who don't know, former Attorney General, who came up to me and said, Commissioner, I am a season ticket holder, and my husband and I are huge fans of the club. And whether it was in the restaurant I was in last night or just about anybody who cares about this city, these games are must-see television and they are ultimately the place that you want to be if you love this city. This club became the first MLS team to draw more than 1 million fans in a season, and averages, as you know, a league record of 53,000 fans per game, including 8 crowds of more than 70,000. That ranks at the upper echelon of global soccer, and it draws more fans on average than any non-NFL Major League sports team. And we couldn't have a better matchup for tomorrow's game, a host that represents the future of our league and a team that represents decades of soccer history, with a supporter group that literally camps out overnight for a prime Timbers Army seat and a stadium that literally shakes with love and passion for their team. I'd like to congratulate both clubs. The Atlanta team, just in their second season, has had amazing success both on and off the field. And for that, we salute Arthur Blank, Carlos Bocanegra, Darren Eales, who's with us today, Tata Martino, and the rest of the organization. The Timbers, our 2015 MLS Cup champions, have been a model organization since joining MLS in 2011. I'd like to congratulate the Paulson family, Merritt and Hank, Gavin Wilkinson, their general manager, Mike Golub, their team president, and the team's entire front office staff. I've always believed that Giovanni Savarese, and I've known him since his MetroStars days, would make a great MLS coach. We used to talk about it as he left the field as a MetroStars player, and he's on his way to becoming that, having taken the Timbers to the championship game in his first season. You know, this week has been the culmination of really a remarkable year for our league, and tomorrow's final is the perfect way to cap off what's been a record season. It's a game that features 2 of our last MVPs, an MLS Cup record crowd of more than 73,000 fans. We think it's going to be the highest attended game in all of global soccer and football of the weekend. And as Dan mentioned, it will be broadcast domestically throughout our country on Fox and Univision in Canada, on TSN and TVR, and globally throughout all of our partners in over 170 countries. It's also a record MLS Cup for our media credentialing. With our broadcast partners and the press contingent, we'll have over 800 credentials issued by our communication staff. You know, it's fair to say that this season was our best year ever, and having given a lot of these speeches at MLS Cup, we seem to be saying that each year. But it is our best year from a sporting and from a business perspective. I'm going to touch on some of those highlights. It began with the launch of our newest team, LAFC, who exploded on the scene with a legendary coach, some great players, including one of the stars of the Mexican national team, and a state-of-the-art soccer stadium that literally is setting an entirely new standard for our facilities league-wide. Sorry about that. My microphones are stuck here, and I can't put my speech here. Give me a second. Okay, LAFC made the playoffs in their inaugural season, joining Atlanta as only the second club to do so since the Seattle Sounders did so in 2009. We opened our 18th stadium built for soccer, 18 soccer stadiums, with the opening of LAFC's Bank of California, and our 19th, after trying for nearly 20 years to get this one done, that was DC United's Audi Field. And Minnesota United is nearing completion of its spectacular new facility, Allianz Field, where they'll begin playing next year. Minnesota has sold out their season tickets for next year. We had the fastest sellout for our upcoming Gold Cup match. This is sure to be another one of our new market success stories. We saw the youngest group of new players in our league history, a record number of Canadians and Americans on MLS rosters, and have players developed in our academies playing more minutes, scoring more goals, and making a real impact with our clubs. The average age of newcomers this season was under 25 years old, the youngest in the history of our league, including 19-year-old Atlanta United Ezequiel Barco, and from Peru, Andy Polo of Portland, a member of their World Cup team. We also welcomed 2 world-class players, Zlatan Ibrahimovic and Wayne Rooney, 2 veterans who really embraced our league. They embraced their clubs, and they really embraced their fans. And it was a sad day in that we bid farewell to an American great, a legend, Clint Dempsey, one of the best players in our country's history, one of the best players our country's ever produced, and somebody we're proud to have in our league. I want to really thank Clint. He's a great guy for everything that he has stood for everything that he's done for the game in our country here, as well as what he's done to raise the reputation of MLS players abroad. We also offer our best wishes to David Villa, somebody I spoke to the other day and I'll see in the office on Tuesday. He gave NYCFC 4 great seasons before deciding to end his playing career in Japan. We set a new transfer fee record with the sale of Vancouver Whitecaps prodigy Alphonso Davies to Bayern Munich. Alphonso's transfer, along with this week's announcement of national team starter Tyler Adams' move to Red Bull Leipzig, these are bold statements about the investment and the progress that we're making in player development programs in our academies and the facilities that we're building throughout the league. Speaking of those facilities, we opened 2 new training grounds in Salt Lake, in New York, in Los Angeles, and Kansas City, and there'll be many more to come. In the last few months, Cincinnati, Orlando, and New England Revolution broke ground on their first team and academy training centers, and Nashville and Miami will break ground on their development facilities in the next year. For many of you that have been around the sport, and I recognize a lot of faces, to think about the investment that our owners are making below the first team roster outside their main facilities is absolutely astounding and would have been unthinkable just a couple of years ago. And our investment in these facilities and young players is beginning to show up on the field. In 2018, MLS Academy products produced more goals, more assists, and minutes played than any other year in our history. We surpassed 100 goals from these Academy products, 100 goals and assists from these products each for the first time in MLS history. And it's providing first team results as well. 4 of the 5 leading teams in Academy product minutes, Real Salt Lake, FC Dallas, the Red Bulls, and Philadelphia Union, qualified for the Audi MLS Cup playoffs, while 8 players on the U.S. men's national team roster in November were developed in MLS academies, a record in the history of the national team for a non-January camp. This year, we not only saw the impact of our investment in youth, but more importantly, our investment in TAM and many other strategic initiatives produced our most competitive, our most unpredictable, and our most entertaining season ever. Goal scoring was at the highest in 15 years. In fact, our 3.2 goals per game was the most of any major international soccer league. MLS clubs averaged 26.95 attempts at goal per game, the highest since our 2002 season. According to Opta, the rating service, MLS is seeing quality goal-scoring chances created per game and completed passes growing to a point that this year we're ranked among the top 5 international leagues in the world. 2018 was another great year of growth. Our newest expansion club, LAFC, became the latest in a long list of first-year success stories with strong ownership, a great coach, and a team led by Carlos Vela, as I mentioned before. This is a team that qualified in their first year for the Audi MLS playoffs. They sold out every single home game and generated buzz in Los Angeles and throughout the world. FC Cincinnati will join MLS as our 24th team with strong local ownership in Carl Lidner, an intensely passionate fan base that shattered records in the USL and have approved plans for a downtown soccer stadium, a groundbreaking we'll go to shortly, in one of the really cool urban parts of that growing city. And 2 of our next expansion clubs took great steps over the last couple of months. Nashville hired longtime Liverpool exec Ian Ayre as their CEO and will break ground on their 30,000-seat stadium for Nashville SC in the weeks ahead, actually in the months ahead. And after nearly a decade of anticipation and many, many questions in my State of the League, Jorge Mas, David Beckham, and Marcelo Clares Inter Miami FC received public approval to finalize a deal for its world-class soccer stadium as part of a $1 billion project at Freedom Park. This was a public referendum giving them the opportunity to take the next step to build their stadium for their Miami club. And as you know, we continue to make progress for the Crew to remain in Columbus, starting with a plan for the Haslam family, owners of the Cleveland Browns, and the Columbus-based Edwards family to take over the club potentially as early as next season. Yesterday, the ownership group, along with the City of Columbus and the Columbus Partnership, unveiled plans for a sporting village in downtown Columbus that will be anchored by a new soccer-specific stadium for Crew SC. This sporting complex, called Confluence Village, will be an incredible addition to the downtown arena district and a great asset for the entire community. In addition to the progress in Columbus with the next few years, MLS will become the first major sports league to have a team in the culturally dynamic city of Austin. We expect to be able to share more details on both of what's happening in Columbus and Austin in the months ahead. You know, as our league has continued to grow, so has our business, often in remarkable ways. In 2018, MLS attendance was the strongest in our league's history, as average revenue per game was nearly 10% higher than it was last year, a record-shattering season in our history. Early this year, we officially launched EMLS, a new competitive EA Sports FIFA 18 league, which is playing an important role in growing the popularity of our clubs among this very important audience. And finally, one of the crowning achievements of our year was the selection of the united bid of Canada, Mexico, and the United States to hold the 2026 FIFA World Cup in North America. As you know, the bid office was based in MLS headquarters, and so many people, led by U.S. Soccer President Carlos Cordero, worked tirelessly to bring the World Cup back to North America. Our selection was a testament to our three nations coming together, and the 2026 bid will undoubtedly, 2026 World Cup will undoubtedly elevate our game on this continent to entirely new transformational levels. Our continued engagement with the broader world of global soccer also continues to grow. MLS is a founding member and a leader of the new World Leagues Forum, a group recognized by FIFA and representing the interest of every major soccer football league around the world. Our senior executives serve on important committees at U.S. Soccer, on FIFA, and at CONCACAF, all because of our commitment to help shape and grow the game at every level. So clearly, this has been a thrilling year for our league, for our sport, and certainly, as I always say, our best days are still ahead. So I want to thank all of you for being part of this journey, and now I'll take whatever questions you may have. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner. For our journalists, as you can imagine, this is being live streamed on MLS Soccer, YouTube, and Twitter today. We do have Paola over here, and we have Krista down here who have microphones. So we will go to a question and answer session. If you could state your name and your affiliation while we take questions. I will say, since we are in Atlanta, the first question is going to go to Mr. Doug Roberson with the Journal-Constitution. The second one is going to go to Jamie Goldberg with the Oregonian, the two competing teams. And then the man who's been here 23 MLS Cups now, Michael Lewis, will go with number 3. And then we're going to get to everybody. So look forward to the questions coming in. So we'll go down to Doug Roberson. Doug.
Has the success of Atlanta United in reaching the MLS Cup in its second season and setting attendance records changed the league's expansion plans in terms of the number of teams or requirements for stadiums, training facilities, et cetera?
Well, Doug, I mean, when I came into the league, this was a league that was founded almost as counter-seasonal programming for NFL teams with their clubs playing in NFL football stadiums. We realized pretty quickly that that wasn't a good model, that we needed to build soccer stadiums and have them centrally located and have them be right-sized for where our league was at that time. And I still believe that this is about building soccer-specific stadiums in the right locations. But every now and again, you have something that happens that shocks you. And what happened in what's been happening in Seattle was the first example of that. That team's still averaging over 40,000 fans a game, and what happening here in Atlanta continues to astound me. So I think we're probably more open to thinking about it now that we've seen two examples of success with large stadiums The model clearly is still focused on smaller facilities. I will say, Doug, that the key factor that drives the success in these stadiums are the way this Arthur Blank and his organization have embraced this team almost on par, maybe on par, Darren, with the way the family looks at the football team. You know, I was at the stadium yesterday. I walked into the entrance, and there is co-branding. There's a great painting of a MLS player right next door to a painting of an Atlanta Falcons player. So I think if we can have it managed in ways where we're sharing a building as opposed to being a tenant in a building, then I think that is probably something we'd consider going forward.
Thank you, Doug. We'll go down to Jamie.
Yeah, Don, there's been reports that the MLS is looking at changing the playoff format as early as next year. I wondered if you could comment on that. Are there any decisions that you expect to be made regarding that, and how would you like to see the playoff format changed going forward?
Well, you know, this league is still very young, and every year we always talk about how we, in the off-season, review our entire competitive format. We've been making fewer changes of late than we had in the early years, and I think as a league leaders and as ownership, we're willing to take a look at what's worked and what might need to be reconfigured to ensure that we have the right format to drive our audience, to drive popularity, to drive our television ratings. There's been lots of talk about changes to the playoff format. We've been looking hard at it. We're going to be talking to our board about it next week. And my guess is that we're probably going to end up with something that's a little bit different than we have now. But we'll wait to go through our ownership meeting before we formally announce that. The idea here is to continually work on making the regular season become more and more important. So winning in March is as important as winning in September or October. And our playoff format, the one that we're evaluating, I think is really going to place a very, very high emphasis, strong emphasis on the regular season.
Great. We're going to go to our next question down here in front. Longtime New York Daily News, Newsday, and now Front Row Soccer, Michael Lewis.
Hey, Don, how are you? No doubt that the league has had a lot of success in many franchises, expansion franchises. Just take a look at what Atlanta has done. But there have been some problem areas around the league, such as some of the original teams that are lagging behind in average attendance. And why do you think they are behind the curve, and what can be done to get them up to where they once were at one time?
Well, you know, there are quite a few existing teams that are doing pretty darn well. Just look at Kansas City. Right now, Kansas City had to go through a reconfiguration. You know, we needed to get the right stadium built. We needed to have a rebranding there, and the team needed to be repositioned in the marketplace. But it's fair to say that we probably didn't have a bigger challenge than the one we had in Kansas City at that time. And with the right work and the right strategy, the right ownership commitment, the right rethinking, it shows that you can turn these things around. So I have great confidence in all of our clubs figuring out what they need to do to try to drive the success that they might have had in previous years. If you look at almost all of those cases, there are individual situations that those teams are working on. We're working on new stadiums in Boston. We're working on new facilities in other markets. We have a situation in Chicago where we're continuing to think what we need to do to try to ensure that the Chicago Fire can get back to its glory that it had, and a lot of that is facility-based. So it is very easy to be new. It is much harder to be new and improved in life. But I can tell you and tell everybody here that those owners and their team presidents are as focused, if not more focused, than any of the newer teams on ensuring that they can deliver the product and the excitement and the value that every fan in our league deserves.
All right. If I could ask the journalists, when you do ask questions, please stand. We have a good-looking group here, so we want to see you on the live stream. Our next three questions, we're going to go to Grant Wall with Sports Illustrated, then Steve Goff of the Washington Post, then Paul Tenorio with The Athletic, and we will continue after that. Grant Wall.
Grant Wall, Sports Illustrated. If Austin is 27 in terms of the teams coming into the league, what's the expansion timeline for 28, and will you go beyond it? How soon will you decide that?
Well, you know, Grant, this is a big country. I could remember when we first started looking at expansion, and I came in at 12, went down to 10. You know, we went up to 14 in 2005. I don't know that at that time we ever thought we'd be at the size we are now. And there has been so much that's gone on over the last decade or more in this sport that has been empowering a lot of the interest in cities across the U.S. and Canada. So every time that we evaluate what and how large we want the league to be, it really is in the context of what we think the country can support. We've said that we're not going to expand any further in Canada. So now it's looking at those cities that we've been in discussions with, and you know the list. And every time I make that list and I leave one out, and I get all sorts of calls from those very interested expansion groups that I forgot to mention. So there are half a dozen of them. We will grant the 28th team and make that decision sometime in the next 12 months. There's no rush. And then we're going to have to decide if we want to go forward beyond 28 teams. That's a discussion that is taking place. We'll begin to introduce the subject at our board meeting later in the middle of next week. I don't expect that or anticipate that there will be an announcement coming out of that, but there's no doubt in my mind that we can support having more than 28 teams in Major League Soccer. No doubt in my mind.
All right, our next question will go down to Steve Goff of the Washington Post.
Don, the Women's League has been growing a bit, but not at a huge rate. There are MLS teams involved in the investment of women's teams, pro teams. Is MLS as a league interested in supporting or investing in women's soccer, or is that still going to be up to individual markets? How do you see the future of women's soccer growing alongside MLS?
For now, Stephen, I don't anticipate to change anytime soon. You know, this is something we're leaving to our individual clubs. It's not something that we're looking at engaging at the league level through Mark on the league operations and competitive side, or Gary on the commercial side. We made that decision a number of years ago to try to let the women's league sort of find their own way and have their own approach to how they wanted to build their market. But we have been encouraging our owners to try to expand what they could offer to their fans. You know, we have a 34 game schedule, 17 non-playoff games on a regular season. There's no reason if the market could support it that we wouldn't want our teams to have more inventory in those stadiums, to have them make more economic sense. We also believe that we need to drive the Soccer Nation thing, that while I am very proud of the fact that Major League Soccer has been a big driver of some of the successes that have gone on in the sport, whether it's from a fan perspective and the supporter movement, or it's growing the commercial aspect of the game, or thinking about technology and social media and the like, I do think that we could use some of our collective wisdom to grow the women's game. And as you start thinking about the World Cup coming in 2026, we'd like to see the whole enterprise here in North America grow. Very impressed by what I see going on at Liga MX. Their clubs have been opening their stadiums for women's games, and they've been popular. I very closely follow what's going on in Canada, obviously, and the women's game is growing there. One of our owners, the owner of the Whitecaps, is one of the original women's team owners and has got a great program. So I don't see any reason why our clubs wouldn't get more engaged going forward. It's got to make economic sense, but I don't see any reason why it wouldn't happen.
Great. After we go to Paul, we're going to go to Nicolas in the back with our great partners up in Quebec at TVA. Paul?
For Don and Gary might want to touch on this as well. The TV deal is coming up in just a few years, and we've seen the ratings go up, but not substantially. Still modest gains. What type of optimism is there that that TV deal can be substantial for the league, and how does the deal with ESPN Plus and the move to kind of cord cutting factor into what a TV deal will look like for the league in 2022?
So I'll throw it to Gary to talk about ESPN Plus and just sort of his views of what's happening in the industry. But growth is good, Paul. Right? Not all sports leagues have increased ratings, so albeit off of a small base, the fact that we've been growing for many years now is a positive. Part of that is because our sport is continuing to grow, and we have more teams and more interest and building more fans in local markets, which are driving our our national ratings. We're also very focused on producing a great product and investing in that and trying to be innovative in how we're presenting our games to our fans. So growth is good. That leads to optimism. Our television deal doesn't expire till the end of 22. Gary will talk a bit about what we're thinking about there to the extent he wants to. But overall, I'm very encouraged. We are in the live content business. This is an industry that is valuing live content. I keep hearing about how, this positive momentum is going to break, and then I read about the new baseball deal and the UFC deal, and so far there's been more and more investment by media partners in live sports and live event programming, and that's what we deliver. So I'm pretty confident that we'll be in a good spot.
The only thing I would add to that is that we are very proud of the fact that our partnerships are with ESPN, Fox, and Univision. And those three companies, while they are more traditional, are clearly at the forefront of a lot of the innovations when you look at the way media is being distributed. In particular, the arrangement we have for our MLS Live package with ESPN Plus has dramatically grown our viewership for our out-of-market games. If you look at what's happened in Canada, both TSN and TVA are up double digits 3 years in a row. And then our product here in the United States, except for ESPN this year, in all 4 years, all of the networks have been up, including the Twitter broadcast of the Univision feed, so the English version of Twitter. When you look at the Twitter numbers compared to the Facebook numbers a year ago, it's almost double the audience of what Facebook had. So, as the commissioner said, any time in today's world where you have positive momentum in media, we view that very positively, obviously. Then you take on top of that our non-live game content is also growing dramatically. We've almost quintupled the amount of revenue we make on the digital media side of our business. And so eventually in 2022, we see the possibility of taking all of our national games, our local games, and selling those either domestically or globally, and including in those packages some of that non-live game content. So we're bullish. We're bullish because of the growth and of the commitment we have with our partners.
Speaking of partners.
Yep. There's going to be a new professional league in Canada starting next year, the Canadian Premier League. Have you had any talks with the league so far? What do you see the relation being in the next few years, and what does it mean for the 3 Canadian teams that are in MLS right now?
Well, we haven't had any talks with them at all, and that's probably something that should change. We have a very, very close relationship with the CSA, with Steve Reed and Peter Montopoli. I have said from the early days that our commitment to Canadian soccer equals our commitment to American soccer. We've got 3 important clubs up north of our border, and we want to do everything we can to develop players and ensure that we could do our part so that Canada can qualify for the World Cup, perhaps before they might get an automatic bid in 2026. I think that anything that we can do to grow the game domestically on the professional level is going to be good for everybody that cares about the game, and whether that's what's happening with the USL here in the United States or what's happening with the CPL in Canada. What it means for our 3 clubs is something that still needs to be determined. We have teams that have second teams. They need to have a place to play. We continue to expand our rosters. We continue to invest in player development. We want to have our players playing at the highest level. I think Canada and Canadian soccer wants our players to be playing at the highest level so that we can develop the Canadian national team to be as good as it possibly can be.
All right, moving ahead, our next 4 questions, we're going to go with Jeff Carlisle with ESPN.com, followed by John Arnold with Goal.com, then Doug McIntyre with Yahoo, and Jordan Culver with Pro Soccer USA and the Orlando Sentinel. And if I could ask the journalist to state your name and affiliation when you stand up. Thank you, Jeff.
Jeff Carlisle with ESPN.com. Don, a couple of months back, there was a report that a pan-North American league, including teams from Mexico, the United States, and Canada, was being considered. Where are those talks at the moment? I mean, how far along has that concept progressed?
You know, it's a good question, Jeff. It starts with, the idea of having international competition for our clubs is something that is a real priority for us. You saw the investments that we made in TAM and some of the strategic initiatives we had in making our clubs more competitive outside of our own league as a real priority. And sure enough, we almost had 2 clubs in the Champions League final, and that was a real goal of ours. It's amazing to sit down with your product strategy committee and say, what do we need to do to get better, faster on a more continental basis? We make some quick decisions. This is the single entity at its best. And then in 1 year, we've become way more competitive against our Mexican neighbors. We and Liga MX believe that there's an opportunity to expand beyond that. And what ways can we have more compelling content and competition for our teams, and doing it in a way where we're growing our mutual fan bases, particularly as it relates to trying to get the game more and more popular leading up to 26. We were down in Mexico meeting with Liga MX when we were there for the World Leagues Forum. We'll continue to have those conversations. We're certainly going to do that in cooperation with CONCACAF. But I'd like to think that we can go beyond where we are now, which was our first iteration of interleague play, which was a championship. The Campeón de Campeones champion playing against our champion in the Campeones Cup. I think you'll see some changes to that format next year, but we're big believers in it. You should know that on Univision, that game had 1.3 million viewers, and that was a game that took place in Canada. So there's a real opportunity to build on this rivalry that exists between our national teams amongst our club teams.
John?
John Arnold with Goal. Perhaps following on from that a bit, I know there was more than just the Campeones Cup announced when you guys announced that partnership, maybe an all-star agreement and some business practice sharing. I want to know maybe how that relationship has evolved and what fans can kind of look for in the future between you and Liga MX.
Well, I don't, Mark, remember the year was Superliga 2000 and Interliga. When was Superliga?
2007.
So, we've been thinking about playing in competition against the Mexican league for a really, really long time. They are our neighbors. We are members and in many ways drivers of CONCACAF. Our national team games are some of the biggest sporting events on the sporting calendar, regardless of what sport it is. So we've been trying, as I mentioned to Jeff, to make this bigger and bigger. On the off the field side of things, we've been working together for a very long time. You should know that Gary oversees Soccer United Marketing. We represent the Mexican national team here in this country. We've been doing that since 2002. There is a very close relationship. I had dinner with Gary, with Emilio Escarga last week. So we're the president, founder of Televisa, family founder of Televisa. So we're trying hard to put more meat on the bone. And I think you'll start seeing over the next year more and more announcements coming out of that cooperation agreement.
Doug?
Doug McIntyre, Yahoo Sports. Don, there was a report earlier this year that the league was considering reducing the maximum number of designated players per team from 3 to 2. Just curious what the latest is on that.
It speaks to my first comment, which we're constantly meeting as a ownership committee to our product strategy committee to look at ways that we can ensure that we're utilizing our resources to be providing the best possible product on the field. And what is that mix? How many designated players? What should they be charged against the cap? What is the investment in TAM? What kinds of discretionary spending should we have or not have? How do we incentivize our clubs to develop more players and give them more, time on the field? And all of this goes into the pot and gets stirred up. And one of the things that has been discussed is reducing the number of designated players. Certainly no decision has been made. I personally believe that we've got a pretty good formula now. It doesn't have to be that somebody is signing a player for $7 million. You've got lots of designated players that are just above what our maximum salary is that are driving great value for our league. So we'll see how that all works itself out. We've got a meeting, as I said, next week, and then in March we all go away as an ownership group for a strategic offsite, and that's probably where something like that would be reevaluated.
Great. Jordan?
Jordan Culver with the Orlando Sentinel and Pro Soccer USA. Don, Orlando City's owner had hinted at possible changes to the MLS AllStar Game. Is the league currently happy with the AllStar Game, or are there talks to change the format of the AllStar Game?
No, it started with Kaká basically saying, hey, why are you guys playing, I don't know if you remember this one, why are you playing against, international opponents? You've got enough great players in your league where you guys should be playing against each other. And that's the format the league had in its earliest days, even when I first started at the league. So, I don't see any changes to that in the short term. We think that there's a real opportunity for us to be part of the international conversation. And certainly, international clubs are trying to be a really, really, really big part of the conversation here. So rather than just let that happen outside of the league's influence and the league's engagement, we've been thinking about how do we kind of share in some of that interest. And I think it's worked pretty well. Some of the more exciting games that we've ever had have been against international clubs. Many of those games we've won. I was here, obviously, of the summer. The crowd that we had and the excitement around the game, our AllStar game, was stupendous. So I don't see that it's going to change. We had been talking about the Mexican league playing its All-Stars against ours. I think that would be a pretty cool thing to do. That might be sometime in our future, but next year we're going to keep the format we have.
All right, we'll continue with our questions. If we have additional questions from our journalists, we going down in front here. I do know we have some of our additional partners from TSN and certainly Fox Sports are also here. I see Rob Stone out in the audience. But continuing with our journalists, do we have any additional questions before we wrap things up? Okay, we'll go to Paul Kennedy with Soccer America down here.
Paul Kennedy of Soccer America. Don, for every Tyler Adams who has will move to Leipzig for a transfer fee, this year you've seen a really pick up of number of young players who have left MLS academies for free and are chasing their European dream, as they say. What concern do owners have that all the money that they've been spending below the first team, as you say, has been made, and they're not going to be able to see return in that with those players playing for their first teams and becoming these young stars?
Yeah, Paul, this is a big issue for our league. And while I don't know that it's entirely about young players chasing their dreams as much as it's international clubs chasing our young players. And that's something that we've got to wrap our collective minds around and figure out how do we manage that in a way that justifies our owners investing this year north of $100 million outside of our first team rosters. We are not, as a country, participants in solidarity and training and compensation. I think that probably has to change. We've got to find a way that if that's going to happen, how do we at least get compensated for it? Or I don't know how we can justify making the kind of investments that we've been making. Lots and lots of restrictions against that. There are all sorts of things going on in global soccer. I was with Scudamore last week, who talked about FIFA changing its rules for solidarity for internal transfers, something that's a new FIFA rule. So I will say our view about this whole area is very, very different than it was 2, 3, 4, or 5 years ago. I think the product that we're developing have become some of the most important assets that we need to start figuring out ways that we're either protecting or we're finding ways to get compensated for if we can't protect them or can't sign them.
Great. We'll go back down to Paul.
Paul Tenorio from The Athletic. Don, you mentioned the situation in Chicago. They have a stadium out in Bridgeview. There's also a group Sterling Bay that owns land and intends to build a stadium. Tom Ricketts is a part of that, the owner of the Chicago Cubs. Has the league had any discussions about a deal that would put that MLS in that stadium or to take advantage of that location, considering the problems with the stadium in Bridgeview?
No, we haven't, Paul. The league certainly hasn't had any of those discussions. I mean, I have got great respect for what the USL is doing, and for them, this is a positive development. Having been in the business I started, we had one stadium that was developed the year before I got in, and we'll open our 20th next year. I know how hard it is, and it is the hardest when you're in big cities. So having made a number of announcements of big stadiums opening up that took almost 20 years to get opened, I'm not sure that I am as optimistic that that stadium will be built in the short term, and we're in the long-term business. Those of you who've been around for a while, I think I went to 3 groundbreakings for the Red Bulls before they had Red Bull Arena. So there's a lot of work that needs to happen before that's an issue or even an opportunity. At the end of the day, I mean, if that happens, good for the USL.
All right, our next question will go to Joe Tollison with SiriusXM in the back.
Don, you talked before about the concern with the young players in the league and going abroad, but is there a concern among the ownership group of kind of a confliction of not only the young player, but when you increase TAM money, a lot of that TAM money is being used to bring in foreign talent into the league, which limits the opportunity for those younger players?
Well, Joe, TAM, again, I think there's a bit of a misnomer, right? It doesn't have to be a foreign player. It could be a domestic player. TAM is about what they earn. So if the domestic player is of value to be able to be bought down by TAM or have TAM be utilized as part of their overall compensation, then I don't see that it is mutually exclusive. We as a league, and I said this at an event the other day, many of you know that I had a pretty public confrontation with Jurgen Klinsmann about his views about what needed to happen about our clubs being more competitive. Right? And many years later, as I look at the competitiveness of our teams, we need to have the kinds of clubs that exist all around the world where you got to really earn your way onto that field. You got to earn your way onto that field as a young player, and you need to earn the money that is now available to anybody. And if a club believes that there's a foreign player that's going to deliver more value to their fans, then that domestic player's got to earn it. And we may or may not agree as to whether or not they believe they have the right to earn it, but the facts are the facts. Look at what's going on here in Atlanta. I don't think anybody says that this is a team about domestic players or about international players. This is a team that has exploded in this city with excitement. And if Joseph Martinez happens to be from Venezuela, I don't think that the fans here in Atlanta would care whether he is from Venezuela or whether he's from England or whether he's from, New Jersey. They just want to see good football, good soccer.
All right, we'll look to continue down in front here with Franco. Hold on if we could.
Franco Panizo, SBI Soccer. Don, you touched on Tyler Adams, Alphonso Davies. Miguel Almiron is also being linked with going abroad. Do you view MLS now as more of a selling league? And if so, why or why not?
So, Franco, we need to become more of a selling league. And for those of you who don't, some of you I've got long, close relationships with. As a person who has been selling this league for nearly 20 years, I've always believed that you needed to have the players that resonated in your market to be those that could be aspirations for young kids who are peeking through the fence when they see them train. And we all need to get, over my multi-decades, get used to the fact that in the world of global soccer, players get sold. I reviewed a whole list of them over the last couple of days. Lukaku's 25. I think he's had 4 or 5 teams that he's played for. Now, those clubs have and starting at Anderlecht, right? So in those countries, they don't need to worry about building the league. The leagues are already built. So we have this careful balance as to how do you retain your stars and how do you create consistency, which is consistent with the major leagues here in our country, even though they get traded to different cities, but they're still on their broadcast partners and a part of, the narrative, where we have a different dynamic. We're part of the global game, part of the beautiful game. So we have been buying for so long, and as we've gone through the analysis, it's hard to justify that investment and the investment that we have to make in player development. We've got to have something that turns this model around, or else it's going to be unsustainable. So when I see Alphonso Davies get sold for what could be $22 million, that's a positive thing for the league. Now, Greg Kerfoot and his club need to use that money to bring somebody in that's going to be as exciting as Alphonso, and that's what happens around the world. And that's what our teams are going to need to do. So should something happen in Atlanta, and Darren could talk about that more than I will, then I'm sure they're going to do whatever they need to do to ensure that they have even higher attendance and even more popularity next year should one of their star players get sold.
Great, thank you, Franco. Do we have any additional questions from our journalists before we wrap things up today as we near the hour mark? We're going to go back down to Michael Lewis. All right. Thank you, Michael.
Yeah, Don, you mentioned stadiums in big cities. One that I could think of that's close to my home is Yankee Stadium, venue for NYCFC. How long do you think NYCFC is going to play there? What's your reaction that It looks like it's going to be 7, maybe 8 years. And could you give us an update and potential sites,
Yeah.
stadium sites in the city?
So, Michael, it's hard. We're in the. It started by saying, we're in the live content business because what happens right now matters, right? And that's how we manage our certain aspect of our business. But the rest of our entire approach has been about the long term. Having gone to the opening of Audi Field and have gone to other games there and knowing how long it took for us to get that stadium built, it was one of the more painful processes that we as a league ever had to go through. And yet here we are today with an unbelievable stadium in an area of town that had we thought about building a soccer stadium maybe 4 or 5 or 10 years ago, we wouldn't be in the fastest growing and most hip and relevant part of Washington, D.C. So this is a long game when it comes to that. Now, that being said, it isn't always an easy game when you have facility challenges. The New York City team is popular. The owners of the club are very focused. It's a great brand. They've had great success on the field. They're averaging nearly 20,000 fans a game. I'm confident that they will get a solution to what has been a 3 or 4 year process of finding a stadium location. Nothing to announce here soon, but I can assure you, you'll probably be at your 30th MLS Cup, and I'll be at the stands, watching on TV. And at some point, everybody will look in New York and Boston, by the way, and have a soccer stadium that we'll be able to host great matches from.
All right. Well, we're going to go ahead and wrap things up. I appreciate all of our journalists, all of our great broadcast partners for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you at tomorrow's match. Thank you very much.
Thank you.